It's late afternoon in the boardroom, and I've just finished presenting my proposal to overhaul our analytics system. I fielded every question perfectly. The board looks impressed. My heart pounds with hope. Then Greg Stanton, my boss and CEO, leans forward. His voice cuts through the silence like a knife. "I think we're done here. Great effort, Lauren, but you're not cut out for leadership. You're not assertive enough. Too cautious. Leadership takes a certain edge." The room goes dead quiet. Board members exchange uncomfortable glances, but nobody speaks up. My throat closes. I spent weeks preparing for this moment. This was my shot at the VP of Strategy role. Greg keeps talking about decisive DNA while my proposal packet slips from my trembling hands. Papers scatter across the polished table. Elizabeth Merrick, the only female board member, leans forward slightly but stays silent. I walk out with my head high, but inside I'm crumbling. I don't cry, I don't scream, but my face says everything. That was 3 months ago. Let me tell you how I got there and what happened next. 6 months earlier, I applied for the VP of Strategy position internally. I had 5 years at the firm, stellar client reviews, and a track record of solving impossible problems. When HR posted the opening, I knew I was ready. "You're definitely being seriously considered," Greg told me during our one-on-one meeting. He smiled that fake smile he reserves for difficult conversations. "Just keep doing what you're doing." I spent weeks perfecting my application. I outlined strategies for client retention, cost reduction, and team efficiency. I even included testimonials from clients who specifically requested me for their projects. 2 weeks later, I learned the truth from Jennifer in HR. She accidentally forwarded me an email chain about the position. Greg had never submitted my application to the board, not once. Instead, he'd fast-tracked applications from 2 male colleagues, Mark from accounting and James from sales. Neither had strategy experience. Mark had been here 6 months. James couldn't spell analytics correctly. I printed that email and locked it in my desk drawer. The first piece of evidence I didn't know I was collecting. "Lauren, I've got great news," Greg announced the next week, barging into my office without knocking. "I'm enrolling you in our leadership development program. 3 months of intensive training." He made it sound like a gift, but I knew better. While I sat through workshops on communication styles and emotional intelligence, Mark and James got promoted above me. Both reported directly to Greg now. The training was held every Friday afternoon at a hotel across town. I lost half my day traveling there and back. My regular work piled up. Clients started asking where I was. "Leadership development takes sacrifice," Greg said when I mentioned the scheduling conflict. "If you're serious about growth, you'll make it work." The irony wasn't lost on me. While I learned about leadership in theory, 2 men with less experience were actually leading. They made decisions about strategies I'd developed. They took credit for systems I'd built, but I completed every module. I took notes. I participated, because somewhere deep down, I still believed hard work would pay off. I was wrong. The breaking point came with the Morrison insurance report. I'd spent 2 weeks analyzing their claim processing delays, identifying bottlenecks in their legacy system. My recommendations could save them millions annually. I submitted the report to Tom, my direct manager, who forwarded it to Greg. Standard procedure. The presentation was scheduled for the following Tuesday. Monday night, I got an email with the final version for review. My heart sank as I read it. Someone had changed my projections completely. Where I'd recommended a gradual system upgrade, the report now suggested an immediate overhaul that would cost 3 times more. The data didn't support this recommendation. Worse, it made me look incompetent. I called Tom immediately. "These aren't my numbers," I said. "Greg wanted some adjustments," Tom replied, sounding uncomfortable. He said the original was too conservative. I printed both versions. The timestamp showed Tom had edited the document at 11:47 p.m. Sunday night. Greg must have called him over the weekend. The next morning, I watched Greg present my altered work to Morrison's CEO. It failed spectacularly. "Lauren, we need to talk," Greg said after the Morrison presentation disaster. His voice was cold, professional. The kind of tone that means you're about to get blamed for something that wasn't your fault. Morrison's CEO had torn apart the proposal. The numbers didn't add up. The timeline was unrealistic. The costs were astronomical. He questioned our competence as a firm. You need to apologize, Greg continued. This was your report, your responsibility. I wanted to scream, to show him the original version, to explain how my conservative approach would have actually worked. Instead, I found myself nodding. I'll email Mr. Morrison today, I said quietly. No, Greg shook his head. Face to face. We're meeting him tomorrow morning. You'll take full responsibility for the miscalculation. That evening, I drafted the most humiliating email of my career. I apologized for errors in judgment and overly ambitious projections. I promised to learn from this experience. But as I typed, my phone buzzed. A text from Sarah, a junior analyst. I have screenshots of your original Morrison report, in case you need them. Someone was watching. Someone knew the truth. That gave me hope. I started paying attention to patterns, really paying attention. What I discovered made my stomach turn. Our firm had 13 managers. Only 3 were women. In the past 2 years, 2 senior women had left to pursue other opportunities. Both had stellar performance reviews before their sudden departures. I dug deeper, carefully. During lunch breaks, I reviewed old personnel files that Jennifer in HR left accessible. I found a complaint from 3 years ago. Sarah Chen, former senior analyst, had filed a discrimination report against Greg. The complaint detailed missed promotions, credit taken for her work, and hostile comments about women in leadership. It was thorough, documented, and compelling. It was also buried. No investigation was conducted. No action was taken. Sarah left 2 months later. I made copies of everything I could find legally. Performance reviews that mysteriously declined after women questioned decisions. Meeting notes where Greg consistently interrupted female speakers. Email chains where he assigned the same project to multiple people, then gave credit to whichever man finished first. The pattern was clear, systematic, and documented. Greg had created a toxic environment that pushed out talented women while promoting mediocre men. Elizabeth Merrick had been watching me for months. I just didn't know it. Lauren, do you have a moment? She asked, appearing at my cubicle one Thursday evening. Most people had gone home, but I was still working on the quarterly client analysis. Elizabeth was the only woman on our board of directors. She'd built her career at a major energy company back when women in corporate leadership were even rarer. Now she consulted for various firms, including ours. I noticed your Morrison presentation, she said, settling into the chair across from my desk. The original version was impressive. The final version was different. My heart raced. She knew. I've been in corporate America for 30 years, Elizabeth continued. I recognize the signs. The question is, what are you going to do about it? We talked for an hour. She shared stories from her own career. Brilliant ideas stolen, credit given to men, promotions dangled like carrots before being handed to less qualified candidates. You have 2 choices, she said as she prepared to leave. Accept it or fight it. But if you choose to fight, you need to be strategic. The job offer came from Peterson & Associates, a prestigious consulting firm in downtown Boston. Director of Strategic Operations, 60% pay increase. Immediate start date. I stared at the offer letter for a long time. This was my escape route. A clean break from Greg, from the toxicity, from the constant battle for basic respect. I called my sister that night. Take it, she said immediately. Why would you stay at a place that doesn't value you? Logical advice. Smart advice. The advice I'd give anyone else in my situation. But something inside me rebelled. If I left now, Greg would tell everyone I couldn't handle the pressure. He'd promote Mark or James into the role I should have had. And the next brilliant woman who joined the firm would face the same treatment. If I go now, he wins, I told my sister. So what's your plan? She asked. I looked at the growing folder of documentation on my desk. I'm going to beat him at his own game. The next morning, I declined Peterson's offer. Greg seemed genuinely surprised when I told him I was staying. Good choice, he said. Loyalty is important in this business. He had no idea what was coming. Robert Chen had been on our board for 15 years before retiring last month. He'd been Greg's mentor when Greg first joined the firm as a junior consultant. Now he was writing his memoirs and enjoying his freedom. Greg's never been challenged, Robert told me over coffee at a quiet cafe near his home. Not once in his entire career. His father was a partner at his first firm. His success has always been cushioned. Robert agreed to meet with me after Elizabeth made the introduction. He was curious about the transition challenges our firm was facing, a diplomatic way of saying he knew something was wrong. Greg's talented, Robert continued, but he's never had to fight for anything. Never had to prove himself under pressure. When someone finally challenges him, he paused, stirring sugar into his coffee. Well, people who've never been tested often crumble when they finally are. Over the following weeks, Robert became an unlikely ally. He didn't take sides openly, but he asked pointed questions during board calls. Questions about succession planning, employee retention, and client satisfaction. Questions that made Greg sweat. The Hartwell manufacturing account was bleeding money. Their contract was worth $200,000 annually, but their project was 3 months behind schedule and over budget. Greg had assigned it to Mark, who was drowning. "It's not working," Mark admitted to me during a coffee break. "The client keeps changing requirements, and I can't keep up." I studied the project files that night. The problem wasn't changing requirements. It was that Mark had never understood the client's core business model. He was treating a manufacturing efficiency problem like a standard IT upgrade. I drafted a proposal. Instead of fighting the client's changes, we could implement a flexible system that adapted to their production cycles. It meant starting over, but it would actually solve their problems. "This could work," Mark said when I showed him the plan. "Can you present it to the client?" 3 days later, I sat across from Hartwell's CEO, walking through my proposal. He listened intently, asked smart questions, and finally smiled. "This is exactly what we needed," he said. "Why didn't we start with this approach?" That afternoon, Hartwell's CEO sent an email directly to our board. He praised the innovative solution and specifically mentioned my name 3 times. Elizabeth forwarded it to me with a simple note. "Well done." Greg's face was stone when I passed him in the hallway. Greg's mistake came at 9:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. I was reviewing budget projections when my email pinged with a new message from him. "Mike, what's our move with the Lauren situation? She's getting too comfortable, and the board is starting to notice her. Need to course correct before she becomes a real problem. Coffee at 2?" The message was meant for Mike Torres, our CFO, but Greg had auto-completed my name instead. I read the email 3 times, my hands shaking. He saw me as a situation to be managed, a problem to be solved. Not a colleague, not a contributor, a threat. I printed the email immediately and saved a copy to my personal drive. Then I sat there, staring at the evidence of what I'd always suspected but never been able to prove. Greg realized his mistake 2 hours later. My phone rang. "Lauren, about that email." His voice was tight, nervous. "That was taken out of context. We were discussing your career development." "Of course," I replied calmly. I assumed it was a misunderstanding, but we both knew the truth was finally out in the open. Elizabeth's question caught Greg completely off guard during the monthly board meeting. I wasn't in the room, but Jennifer in HR gave me the details later. "Greg, I've been reviewing our succession planning," Elizabeth had said, her voice casual but pointed. "What's our pipeline for developing internal talent, particularly for senior leadership roles?" Greg had stumbled through an answer about ongoing evaluations and identifying high potential candidates. But when Elizabeth pressed for specifics, names, timelines, development plans, he had nothing concrete. "What about Lauren Blake?" Elizabeth continued. "Her client feedback is exceptional, and she's been here 5 years. What's her trajectory?" According to Jennifer, Greg's face had gone red. He'd muttered something about Lauren needing more seasoning and leadership presence. "Interesting," Elizabeth had replied, because Hartwell's CEO specifically praised her strategic thinking in his email to the board last week. For the first time in years, Greg's smooth confidence had cracked in front of the board. 3 members had taken notes during Elizabeth's questions. They were starting to notice the gaps in Greg's explanations. The tide was slowly turning. Kevin was the summer intern everyone loved, bright, eager, and genuinely excited about the work. Greg had taken him under his wing, promising mentorship and potential full-time opportunities, which is why I was surprised when Kevin knocked on my door, looking nervous and conflicted. "Miss Blake, I need to tell you something," he said, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. "About the Morrison report." My heart stopped. What about it? Kevin shifted uncomfortably. Mr. Stanton asked me to revise the financial models in your report. He said the projections were too conservative, that clients prefer aggressive recommendations. The pieces clicked into place. Greg hadn't just altered my report, he'd used an intern to do it, keeping his own hands clean. He told me this was normal, Kevin continued, that senior managers always fine-tune junior work. But after seeing how the presentation went, he trailed off. I looked at this young man, barely 22 years old, struggling with his first ethical dilemma in corporate America. You did the right thing by telling me, I said gently. Do you have any documentation of the changes you made? Kevin nodded, pulling out his phone. I took screenshots, just in case. The internal audit was routine, something our firm conducted annually to ensure compliance with industry standards. But this year, the auditors found irregularities in 3 major contracts handled by Greg's direct reports. Mark had approved overtime expenses without proper documentation. James had signed off on vendor payments that exceeded authorized limits. Both violations traced back to decisions made under Greg's guidance. It's just paperwork issues, Greg announced during the staff meeting. Mark and James made some clerical errors, nothing serious. But serious or not, the board was notified, and when the auditors recommended enhanced oversight of contract management, Greg threw both men under the bus. I can't be expected to micromanage every detail, he told the board, according to Elizabeth. These managers need to take responsibility for their mistakes. Mark and James looked shell-shocked during the following week. The men who'd been fast-tracked over me were suddenly being treated as liabilities. Greg's loyalty lasted exactly as long as his convenience. Elizabeth called me that evening. The board is starting to see a pattern, she said. Greg's people keep making mistakes that he somehow never knows about. The dinner was Elizabeth's idea. Just a casual board gathering, she'd told me. We like to hear from different voices occasionally. I arrived at the upscale restaurant nervous but prepared. 3 board members were there, Elizabeth, David Park, and Helen Rodriguez. All successful executives with decades of experience reading between corporate lines. Tell us about your experience here, David said after we'd ordered. What's working well and where do you see opportunities? I chose my words carefully. I didn't attack Greg directly. Instead, I painted a picture. Talented women leaving for other opportunities, promising projects derailed by last-minute changes, junior staff struggling without proper mentorship. When Helen asked about specific examples, I shared the Morrison situation, how my conservative approach had been changed to an aggressive one that failed. Interesting, she said. Who made that decision? The final version came from senior management, I replied diplomatically. Elizabeth smiled slightly. She knew I was being strategic, avoiding direct accusations while letting the facts speak for themselves. By dessert, all 3 board members were asking pointed questions about our firm's culture and leadership development. The conversation had shifted from casual to investigative. The board vote was close, 4 in favor of investigating leadership restructuring, 5 against. Greg had survived, but barely. Elizabeth called to brief me afterward. It's a start, she said. 3 members are now questioning Greg's effectiveness, but we need more. Greg seemed to sense the shifting winds. His behavior became more erratic, more defensive. He started having closed-door meetings with his allies on the board, trying to shore up support. But his paranoia was showing. During a staff meeting, he made an offhand comment about disloyal employees who bite the hand that feeds them. His eyes found mine across the conference table. Some people think they know better than management, he continued. But experience matters in this business. Proven leadership matters. The room was uncomfortable, tense. People stared at their laptops, avoiding eye contact. Even Mark and James looked embarrassed by Greg's obvious targeting. After the meeting, 3 different colleagues approached me privately. That was inappropriate, Sarah said. He can't talk to you like that. Greg's mask was slipping, and everyone could see it. Lauren, I have a new opportunity for you, Greg announced, calling me into his office the next morning. His tone was false cheerful, the kind salespeople use when they're about to sell you something terrible. I'm creating a new position. Director of Special Projects. You'll have autonomy to work on strategic initiatives, research new markets, explore innovation opportunities. It sounded impressive until I read the job description. No direct reports, no budget authority, no client contact. An office in the basement, away from the main floor. A corporate cage with a fancy title. This seems like a lateral move, I said carefully. Sometimes lateral moves are strategic, Greg replied. It'll give you space to develop your leadership style without the pressure of day-to-day operations. Translation: he was removing me from anything important while making it look like a promotion. I accepted the position gracefully and moved to my new basement office. But I also started using my isolation strategically. With no daily responsibilities, I had time to conduct informal interviews with staff members. People talked to me now. They shared frustrations, concerns, and stories about decisions that made no sense. I listened, took notes, and slowly built a comprehensive picture of our firm's dysfunction. The binder grew thick over the following weeks. I organized everything chronologically, creating a timeline that was impossible to ignore. There were the personnel decisions. Qualified women passed over for promotions, while less experienced men advanced rapidly. The Morrison report showed clear evidence of altered work being attributed to me. Kevin's testimony about being asked to manipulate data. I included client feedback, emails praising my work specifically, requests for me to handle their accounts, complaints about service quality that correlated with Greg's managerial changes. Financial data told its own story. Client retention had dropped 12% since Greg became CEO. 3 major accounts had threatened to leave, citing poor project management. The Hartwell situation was typical, not exceptional. Most damning were Greg's own words. The misdirected email calling me a problem. His public comments about women lacking leadership edge. Documented instances where he'd interrupted female speakers in meetings while allowing men to finish their points. I cross-referenced everything with dates, witnesses, and supporting documents. The pattern was undeniable, systematic, and legally problematic. The question was no longer whether Greg was sabotaging women's careers. The question was what the board would do about it. The exodus started quietly. First, Amanda from marketing gave notice, then Carlos from project management. Within 3 weeks, 5 junior employees had resigned. What made it significant wasn't the number, it was their exit interviews. Jennifer in HR was required to document their reasons for leaving, and she shared the themes with me confidentially. Lack of growth opportunities, poor management communication, feeling undervalued, and consistently, Lauren Blake was the only manager who listened to us. My name appeared in every single exit interview, not as a complaint, but as the one bright spot in an increasingly toxic environment. The board received summaries of these interviews. Elizabeth told me later that Helen Rodriguez had been particularly concerned about the trend. When your best junior talent consistently mentions one person as exemplary, Helen had said during a board call, you either promote that person or you lose them too. Greg tried to spin the departures as natural turnover and employees seeking new challenges. But smart board members understood that good people don't leave good companies. They leave bad managers. The client ultimatum came on a Wednesday morning. Harrison Industries, our second largest account, sent a formal letter to the board. We are requesting that Lauren Blake be assigned as primary consultant for our account, effective immediately. If this arrangement cannot be accommodated, we will be forced to seek services elsewhere. 2 other clients sent similar letters that week. Morrison Insurance, despite the earlier disaster, specifically asked for me to lead their next project. Hartwell Manufacturing wanted to expand their contract, but only if I remained their point of contact. Greg was furious. During the emergency board meeting called to address the situation, he argued that clients were being manipulated and that I was undermining company leadership. But business is business. Harrison Industries alone represented $300,000 in annual revenue. Losing them would require laying off staff and cutting budgets. Elizabeth's question was simple. Do we give clients what they want, or do we lose them to prove a point? The board voted unanimously to honor the client requests. I was officially reassigned to handle 3 major accounts, while technically still holding the Director of Special Projects title. Greg's power was shrinking in real time. Just when I thought I was winning, Greg played his final card. I've brought in Meridian Consulting to conduct an independent evaluation of our team leadership dynamics, he announced during Monday's staff meeting. They'll be interviewing employees and assessing our organizational effectiveness. It sounded reasonable, even progressive. Who could argue with independent evaluation? The Meridian team spent 2 weeks conducting interviews, reviewing files, and observing our operations. Their final report was devastating, to me. While Lauren Blake demonstrates technical competency, multiple sources indicate she creates divisiveness within the team. Her approach to leadership is polarizing, with some staff expressing concern about her ambition and methods. The report recommended continued development for me while praising Greg's steady leadership during challenging times. I read the report in shock. None of it matched the feedback I'd received directly from colleagues. But it was professionally formatted, objectively written, and apparently independent. The board was shaken. A final vote on leadership restructuring was postponed indefinitely. I walked out of that meeting feeling like I'd lost everything. Again. Sarah found me in my basement office that evening, tears streaming down my face. I was drafting my resignation letter, finally ready to admit defeat. "Don't you dare give up," she said, sitting across from my desk. "Not when we're this close." "Close to what?" I asked bitterly. "I just got destroyed by an independent report." Sarah smiled grimly. "Independent? Lauren, I need to show you something." She pulled out her laptop and opened a LinkedIn page. "Remember how you asked me to research Meridian Consulting? Look at their founding partners." My heart stopped. There, smiling in a professional headshot, was David Morrison, Greg's college roommate. The same David Morrison who'd been tagged in Greg's social media posts from their recent golf weekend. "It gets better," Sarah continued, pulling up more screenshots. "I found email correspondence between Greg and Meridian from 3 months ago. He fed them talking points about what to discover during their evaluation. The independent report wasn't independent at all. It was a carefully orchestrated hit job, paid for with company funds and designed to destroy my credibility. But Greg's desperation had made him sloppy. And now we had proof of ethical violations that could end his career. Elizabeth needed to see this immediately. Greg walked into the boardroom expecting a routine performance review. Instead, he found 6 board members waiting with grim expressions. I sat at the far end of the table, calm and quiet. "Greg, we need to discuss some concerning information that's come to light," David Park began, opening a thick folder. The evidence was overwhelming. Email correspondence with Meridian Consulting, financial records showing payments authorized from Greg's discretionary budget, screenshots of LinkedIn connections proving the personal relationship. Greg tried to bluff first. "This is a misunderstanding. Meridian came highly recommended." When that failed, he tried to lie. "I had no idea about any personal connections. I relied on HR to vet the consulting firm." Finally, he resorted to rage. "This is a setup. You're targeting me because of some disgruntled employee's complaints." With each response, he dug himself deeper. The board watched him unravel, word by word, excuse by excuse. "Effective immediately. Your contract is terminated for cause," Helen Rodriguez announced. "Lauren Blake will assume the CEO position with full board support." Greg stared at me in disbelief. "This is illegal. I'll sue for wrongful termination." Elizabeth smiled coldly. "No, Greg. This is accountability." I returned to my old team the next morning. No fanfare, no company-wide announcement. Just quiet professionalism and a focus on moving forward. But throughout the day, something beautiful happened. One by one, employees stopped by my temporary office. Some left notes, others sent emails. "You're the reason I stayed. Finally, someone who listens. Thank you for not giving up." Amanda, who'd given notice the previous month, called to ask if her position was still available. Carlos wanted to know if he could withdraw his resignation. Word spread quickly that the toxic leadership was gone. I didn't celebrate Greg's downfall publicly. No social media posts, no industry gossip, no triumphant interviews. Instead, I focused on rebuilding trust and establishing a culture of respect. Within a week, Meridian Consulting lost 3 major clients who'd learned about their fabricated reports. Professional reputation matters in consulting. Greg's final scheme had backfired on his co-conspirators too. Karma has its own timeline, and justice doesn't always need our help. 6 months later, our firm had transformed completely. Revenue was up 18%. Client satisfaction scores reached all-time highs. Employee turnover dropped to nearly zero. But the real victory came during the annual board meeting. Elizabeth Merrick stood to make an announcement that caught everyone by surprise. "After 15 years of service, I'll be retiring from the board this fall," she said. "However, I'd like to nominate Lauren Blake to take my seat, making her the youngest woman ever to serve on our governing body." The vote was unanimous. As I looked around that boardroom, the same room where Greg had humiliated me months earlier, I thought about the journey that brought me here. I didn't take him down for revenge. I rose up to make sure no one like him could ever stand in our way again. The little girl who was told she wasn't assertive enough had learned the most important leadership lesson of all. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to give up. Greg had underestimated my determination. That was his biggest mistake.